Think for yourself. Question authority.
What's up, guys? Welcome back. Now, in early February, I said that I would be covering the PlayStation 5 if something about it got revealed that was game-changing, and lo and behold, yes, something was revealed that is very game-changing in terms of game development for the next generation of consoles and for pretty much all consoles going forward. You can almost guarantee that this is the way of the future in terms of SSD storage being how game development is going to progress and advance going forward because of how the innovation Sony is using in their SSD drive is being put to effect to great use in the PlayStation 5. So what exactly are we talking about here? Well, actually, I talked about this myself in October of 2019 in regards to Nintendo possibly using SSDs in their next iteration of the Switch, the more powerful Switch that has been rumored basically. And here's what I had to say, and then after that you'll see exactly what Mark Cerny said, and pay attention to what was said here because he repeats almost word for word from what I said last year in October 2019. Take a look. Now, of course, displaying all that on screen will in turn require the increased processing power of the next generation consoles. However, one thing to consider as well is that it's very possible that a lot of the details you see in front of you will only be loaded in your field of view, and when you start then turning around, the game world will load seamlessly so that you couldn't actually tell it wasn't there before turning. This will further dramatically increase the level of detail seen, so theoretically an open world game could have the same level of detail as a game that is enclosed in a room or building would. So either way here, you're looking at quite a big leap in technology on all aspects that wouldn't be possible without these extremely fast SSD drives.
So when I talked about the dream of an SSD, part of the reason for that 5 gigabyte a second target was to eliminate loads, but also part of the reason for that target was streaming. As in, what if the SSD is so fast that as the player is turning around, it's possible to load textures for everything behind the player in that split second? If you figure that it takes half a second to turn, that's 4 gigabytes of compressed data you can load. That sounds about right for next gen.
So from what you saw there, the ultra-fast SSD streaming capability is going to be a huge benefit for next generation consoles going forward and into the future for future consoles as well, and for Nintendo. Especially for Nintendo and especially for the mobile market. And why is that? Well, as you're seeing here in the gameplay, I'm playing Astral Chain on the Nintendo Switch. It's a very stylized game, but of course the environments are designed in a way that they're smaller, more self-contained, and therefore the game has a very polished, very high quality graphical look because it's designed to take advantage of the system's capabilities in its limited fashion that it has, and it looks very good doing it. However, that is also why you do not see Nintendo or other third-party developers putting very huge grand-scale open-world games on the Nintendo Switch, because the system not only cannot process all that graphical data on the screen, but also it cannot render or load the environments for the memory aspect of it fast enough for the system to handle. There's just way too much for the system to load at a given time. That is one of the key reasons why you don't see big open world brand new games on the Nintendo Switch, is the memory aspect of it is very limited. So like I was talking about last year, it's not just a graphical detail issue, it's also a memory issue as far as what it can load at a given time. And even the Nintendo Switch in some games takes a long time to load. In fact, I was playing Doom 2016 on the Nintendo Switch just last Sunday using the M Classic cable, which is what I'm also using here for Astral Chain. But I was playing the game and the loading time still in Doom can take longer than what they are on other consoles, even on the Nintendo Switch, which is a mobile platform and has its own quote-unquote SSD type of NAND. Even though it was much slower than these SSD drives, it still has that type of memory. And another benefit from the ultra-fast streaming data from the SSD to the game is that these next-generation consoles, the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, they don't have to have repeat or duplicate game data being sitting there on the hard drive ready to access because the drives are too slow basically, and that's why they have to do that. It's a clever way to have shorter loading times when they have the data just sitting there ready to access for the current generation. However, for the next generation, they don't have to do that anymore. So theoretically, game file sizes could actually shrink or remain the same as current gen by eliminating the repeat files that they have to have sitting there, because the SSD drive can actually stream that directly every single time fresh without having to have files just sitting there waiting to access. And the speed of PlayStation 5's SSD drive at 5.5 gigabytes per second is actually revolutionary for game creation in this way, because they're actually going to be, like was brought out there earlier in the video, they're actually going to be streaming assets around the player as you move through the game environment. So you won't even be able to see that what's behind you, to the left of you, to the right of you, is actually not there at all. And as soon as you start moving, the game will actually load it in for you, which means that the actual graphics processor of the PlayStation 5 can render what's in front of you, what's in your field of view, from only what you can see to the biggest detail possible, and then render in the rest as you go. So theoretically, that 10 teraflops versus the 12 teraflops of the Xbox Series X, due to the extra speed of the SSD drive for the PlayStation 5, which from what it appears to be over 2 times faster than the Xbox Series X, even though it has less teraflops at 10 teraflops versus 12 teraflops, the amount of graphical data that the PlayStation 5 has to process in general for the environment as the player moves would be less than the Xbox Series X, because it would be loading it faster before they even move to that area of the game. Henceforth, less processing power needed, and theoretically from that aspect, that would mean that basically you're looking at apples to oranges there with the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. Most likely you're not going to see any difference at all in graphical quality or how games run. The games will actually be streaming their assets in faster on the PlayStation 5 than the Xbox Series X, and then like I said, less grunt and less force is being needed on the GPU and the CPU, because it doesn't have to have all those things sitting there around the player that the GPU and CPU still has to render, because it has to have something there when you turn, right? So if it's not fast enough to load it before you see that area of the game, then they have to load it there before you see it. And what Mark Cerny was trying to say in that presentation is that the PlayStation 5's SSD will be so fast that it will actually be able to load that before you even notice it when you turn over to that area. It will load it as you go. So it's streaming, but streaming from the actual hard drive SSD itself. It's not streaming from, like Google Stadia or something like that. It's not streaming from the internet. It's instantaneous streaming that you don't even see when you're playing at your home on the console itself. So that right there, in my opinion, is the most revolutionary part of the PlayStation 5 that is going to trickle down to the other consoles, especially for Nintendo in a mobile aspect. Like I said, since the Nintendo Switch has a lot of games that are rendered in smaller environments because it can't render these big environments, having an SSD drive like this for Nintendo, maybe even 2 gigabytes per second, like we talked about last year with UFS storage, they could create something very similar to that for the next Switch, not only to get ports, but also for Nintendo themselves to create big open world games that will be rendering them in a way such like this, where the actual environment will be rendered for what the player can see, but not necessarily what is needed for the console to see, because it's being loaded in so quickly. The most important thing for a game is for the environment to be seen by the player while the console does all the work in the background. So that is the magic of the SSD drive and how they're innovating in game development with it in a way that hasn't been done before, because quite frankly, game development hasn't reached this level yet where they have drives that are this fast that are available to all the consumers, and especially at an affordable price. So in my opinion, this is a huge breakthrough for gaming and gaming development, and it's going to trickle down to Nintendo. Nintendo is definitely going to jump on board on this. This is the way of the future and the way everyone's going to be developing games. It's not just, oh man, fast loading. No, it's actually smart game development to have your game being loaded in that way and streamed in that way, because then you can focus on aspects of the game creation that's in front of the player and not necessarily having to worry about everything around the game that the player can't see. I think that is a huge benefit for gaming, and I think Nintendo's going to use this, and going forward we're going to see a lot of games take advantage of things like this, including future mobile devices that take advantage of this technology, because like we've been talking about here, the mobile technology aspect has been coming into line with the console aspect and home computer aspect. They're blurring the lines here. So SSD drives are the way of the future for game creation, and I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that. later this year in 2020 when we see more of these consoles revealed. And then people will likely understand a lot clearer exactly what Mark Cerny was trying to discuss in that presentation yesterday, because obviously a lot of people were bored by it and, you know, falling asleep because he talks very soft and everything. But that presentation was for developers, and that was why developers have been calling the PlayStation 5 the most exciting piece of hardware in the last 20 years. From what they were saying on Twitter the other day, and you know, developer testimonies and everything. I think that is why. And mainly is because of the SSD drive changes the way game development is going forward for the future. All right, guys, so it's pretty exciting stuff. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section. If you did enjoy this video, please hit the like button, subscribe for more, and I'll talk to you very soon in the next video. Have a great day.